Hey y'all, this is Shon Gerber. Thanks for listening today, but before we get started, I wanted to update you on the launch of my CISSP Cyber Training membership for my listening audience. On March 5th, 2023, I began offering a monthly CISSP membership at 60% off my already low price. This is an introductory offer of $19 a month for the first year. With that insanely inexpensive price, you will get all of my CISSP content, practice exam questions, all my current and upcoming curated content, and finally, me. As I'm growing my products and services for my site, you will be on the ground floor to take advantage of an offer that will never, ever come back again. So if you're planning on taking the exam in 2023, or if you want to learn more about cybersecurity, this will be the time to make a life and career-altering decision for you and your family. This amazing offer is only available for the next 2 weeks, so I highly recommend that you don't delay and sign up today. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Reduce Cyber Risk and CISSP Training Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need to pass the CISSP exam the first time. Hi, my name is Shon Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to pass the CISSP exam and grow your cybersecurity knowledge. All right, let's get started. Giddy up. Hey, y'all, welcome to the Reduce Cyber Risk Podcast. This is Shon Gerber again, calling out to you and hope everybody's doing well this beautiful week. We have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday coming up here in the United States, and so everything is getting prepared for that. It's a great time to be. If you like food, it's an awesome time. And the United States is one of the things that we actually truly crave. It's great. You got turkeys, you got ham, you've got everything you could possibly think of on this Thanksgiving holiday season, and for us, it's just a great time. Hope everybody's been doing well this past couple of weeks. And things have been really busy here at Gerber Central here in Wichita, Kansas. It's been pretty crazy as I've been working with my wife and her business. We've now bedded that down for the season, so that's been a good thing, and I'm able to spend a little bit more time on Reduce Cyber Risk podcast and creating some great content around the CISSP. And so as we know, one thing that we're trying to get into more is as if you're out there self-studying for the CISSP, it can be a bit of a challenge to do that, and I've just been paying attention to some people that were in the Wichita area that have been studying for that exam, and it's been kind of interesting talking to them. They've been having some study groups. They've been trying to get that going for quite some time now, and they've had some good success, but at the end of it, it really comes down to is trying to self-study for this thing can be a challenge. So that's kind of the purpose behind Reduce Cyber Risk podcast and why we've put all this together. So today's podcast, we're going to be getting to a couple key things, and as if you have already known, we kind of pull out some CISSP articles that are on the web, as well as providing some CISSP training that I provide through the courseware. You can go ahead and Google that. You'll find it real quickly, but there's also the training that I provide there as well. And then finally, some CISSP exams will be available to you. Exam questions are there as well. So that's stuff that you can do to study for the exam. And that's the one thing I was also reading a recent article on about the CISSP is that 50% is knowledge and 50% is based on how you take these exam questions. And I will also say, though, that the interesting part around that is if you I remember when I studied for this thing, it was how many questions can I cram in, how fast can I do it, and can I regurgitate it as quickly as I possibly can. And then that's changed a lot over time, but at the end of it, the questions that they provide in the test banks will not, I mean, there probably are some that will go word for word, but at the end of it, ISC Squared puts out questions that you can use. The books have questions you can use, and you just got to ask yourself, though, the ISC is not going to make these questions the same. Now, they may make them similar, but they're not going to make them the same. So understanding the content is really a great way for you to actually be able to do well on this test. And at the end of it, when you pass the test, you want the CISSP certification. You want the ability to get a job. And so you're going to have to know this information. You can't just go and take a test and dump it and go. My kids do that quite frequently. They would take a test and then they would just dump it, and then you'd ask them that same question not too long later and they would go, "What are you talking about?" So it's kind of interesting because they don't think about the long-term consequences for just cramming for these tests. So it's kind of interesting. All right, so let's get into our first question or first comment we're going to have today on this podcast. And what it is, we're looking for basically around how to start looking for an InfoSec, which is information security job. That's going to be the article that we're going to go into today. And what I'll tell you also as we go into this, you can get the free videos that I have available out there. Basically, domain 1 through 4. There's a bunch the CISSP videos, the full length videos that I use for teaching. You can get a plethora of those through domains 1 through 4. I've got a select number of those videos out there available. But if you go and you sign up for my email list, you'll be able to get 11 videos free just for signing up. So I highly recommend you go out there and you do that. As there's also, I'm building other various free content that'll be available out there. Podcasts, the links to those podcasts are all there as well. And so there's a lot of different aspects you can do by just going to the website. If you want, you also can buy the full domains 1 through 8 video training that's available at ShonGerber.com. You can get all of that there. There's a really good Black Friday pricing here in the United States. We have Black Friday, and that's coming up it's on Friday, this coming Friday. And so you can pick up all of that content right there and available for you. And it's awesome. So we're going to have a really reduced price. It's going to be basically 50% off of my normal pricing. Okay, so let's roll right into the CISSP articles. This comes from peerless.com, and they have some articles out there about what should you do when you're looking for an InfoSec job. How should you handle it? And so here's some key nuggets from this article that they had put out there, and you'll have the link will be in my show notes, so you can be able to click on that link and go to them directly. And one of the these are some big bullets, but I'll add some context to this as well. They talk about don't be afraid to ask questions. Now, the one thing I've done numerous interviews with people because I'm pretty old. I've been around for quite a while. And so when I first did interviews, one thing I was concerned about as the interviewee is, what should I ask questions? Being on the opposite end of the table, asking the questions of people that want a job, I will tell you flat out right now, if you have the ability to ask questions, please do. It shows that you actually are interested. It shows that you have done some thought into this. So asking questions is very important. Now, I add a little bit of a caveat to that. You need to be very careful about not asking too many questions. So it's kind of one of those things where if you get asked, I'm just using this as an arbitrary number, you get asked 3 questions or 4 questions, then you ask maybe 1 question. I'd say more like if they ask 4 or 5 questions, then you ask 1. So about 20%. And so you need to ask some question, but they also need to be ones that have been thought out, not like, where's the bathroom? So you need to, and understanding if the job is going to be, if you're looking for benefits, maybe a benefits question would be good, 1 question around benefits, but the questions need to be focused on around the security piece of this and how would you utilize security within their environment. And I would ask them key questions based on the role. What is the role if it's a security architect role? Can you explain a little bit more about your enterprise and the role of a security architect within your enterprise? And then have them say some stuff around that. But again, you need to make sure you ask the right pertinent questions to the right pertinent people. You also need to specify the list of positions you're looking to move into and which ones do you want to go. So if you have your resume and you already applied for a role, let's say a security analyst role within a security operations center, you need to be understanding those are the positions that are available. You also need to provide technical details about yourself and what you're trying to achieve. And that this comes down to your goals. What are you trying to be with your goals, your bio? How are you wanting to get there? Where did you start? How did you end there? Again, the employer is trying to pick out an aspect about you that they can decide, hey, you know what? I want to hire this person. Now, try not to be too pushy. This was what it talks about when asking people for help. So that means when you're talking to people that are helping you get in the role, don't try to push on them going, hey, where am I at? What's going on? How'd I do? Those kind of things you don't need to be pushing onto people. However, you need to be able to ask questions. So it's that fine balance of people skills. There's a really good book that I recommend, and it's super thin. It doesn't cost much. It's like on Amazon it's like $2 to $3 US. It's called Skill with People. And it's, I think, Les Giblin. And it's a really good book on how to deal with people. If you're in IT, you probably struggle with this, and sometimes a lot of IT people do. It's a really good book, and I'd highly recommend you go out and buy it. If you're looking for an internship, you must really first look at what are the companies out there that are looking for interns. Not all companies are looking for interns in the security space, so that's kind of an important area to be there. Also, you need to connect with various groups on social networks and engage there. Now, a key piece around that is, if you are a social networking person, be very careful what you post online, because again, people are watching what you do. And if you post some buffoonery out there online, the interesting part is that never goes away. And as a security professional, you should know this, that when you post something out there, it will always be there forever. It will never go away, ever. You can contact recruiters or talent agencies. I've done this as well and been in contact with the various recruiters. It's a way that you can be basically having guidance around that. Now, I also would recommend that one way to help win with recruiters is to provide value for them. If you can look at ways that you can help them and help them find new people, that's always positive too. So then the recruiters are helping you to find a role. Now, as there are over 2 million jobs, it's always good to have a recruiter on your side, because they will help you kind of fish through or funnel through some of the stuff that may be a good fit for your role, that with your background, or others that may not be a good fit. If it's relevant, again, look at what the opportunities are. You need to polish up your English skills. It's always a plus, and I would highly recommend that you do this. Now, I've got a daughter who speaks English as a second language, and the one thing that I have talked to her on over and over is her English. That's not a good word. Her English speaking skills. And in the United States, it doesn't really matter what role you're working with, the common language typically used is English. So if you have solid English skills and you can make those better, that is wonderful. To also put it in perspective, I said also so twice. Jeez, that's crazy. To put it in perspective as well, one thing to consider is that you need to, in these roles, security roles, they are influencing roles. They are roles that you talk to different companies, you talk to leadership, and so therefore you need to be able to provide influence on leadership around what needs to occur. Well, if your English skills are not very good, it's pretty hard to go and provide influence. So that's why we recommend that you get some level of increased knowledge around the English skills. Is it totally required? No, not at all. Like if you're from China and you're only going to work in the Chinese market and you really don't want to go anywhere else, well, then your English skills may not be as important. But I will say you work with contractors and you work with vendors, and so having a good English skills would be helpful in that space as well. So just something to consider. The other thing, one of the bullets they had also down there was that you should utilize Grammarly. So basically, it's when you're dealing with writing content and you want to have the ability for it to tell it's grammatically correct. Use Grammarly to do that. Now, I will say Grammarly is pretty close. It does a pretty good job. However, it's not perfect. So don't rely totally on Grammarly. Also, as you are understanding how Grammarly is doing things, you need to understand as well, what does the sentence structure look like? So my daughter, she's really good at leaving off prepositions. Now, she's Chinese, so that makes sense, right? So it was so funny when I was growing up as a kid, I could never understand why the Chinese would leave off prepositions. Well, in their language, they don't have that. And so I didn't get it when I was younger, and I really actually didn't get it till I adopted a child from China. And now as she speaks, I see her leave out those key prepositions and adjectives that she just doesn't do it. She just doesn't do a very good job with it. So it's important that as you are studying Grammarly and that if it's helping you with your sentence structure, that you understand why you're doing that and pay attention to it. Because if you do, it will go very well for you. It really will. You also need to tweak your message when contacting people based on what's worked best so far for you. And it's always good to have someone that's personally within a company to help you, because again, if they can help walk your resume in, it's way easier for you to get a job, or at least get an interview, than if you just start blasting people with emails. That just doesn't work. Honestly, it may work, but you may not want what you get, and that's really what could happen to you. So make sure that you build personal relationships. And if you haven't figured it out yet in the world of security, Personal relationships are everything, and that is how everything is built here. And so if you build those good relationships, the good roles will come to you, and the not so good roles will move on, or at least you'll have a heads up on what role is good and what one is not good. You need to use job boards. There's various ones that Peerless talks about, ones they've had. Indeed, Monster.com, Dice.com is another one that is for more of technical people. And again, those are important places to go. Freelance, Fiverr as well. You need to treat your job search basically as your current job. So it's like, again, I use my kids as an analogy because I got so many of them. I mean, I have 7 children, so I see things on a daily basis that most people deal with, and you're just like, really? I mean, I had a daughter come in today. She's 18. She made the comment to my wife as she was going downstairs, and they were having a bit of a challenge, and basically did this. And this gal's from Uganda, and didn't have anything, and which in the United States it's interesting because you don't necessarily need all the stuff that you get in the United States. And so this girl who came from Uganda walks down the stairs, and she goes, after having a little bit of a tiff with my wife, and says, "You started this," and you're just like, are you kidding me? So that it's an interesting world. So if you have children out there, you know what? Yeah, they're great. They're fun when they're little, and they're fun when they're middle, and then when they get older, they're not so much fun anymore. So it's an interesting time. And if those of you who don't have children, great. Use this as an opportunity, possibly to think twice about doing that. Wait a little while before you do it. That's for sure. So again, those are important things to consider when you're looking at a job. Now, I'm going to give you my takeaway. So Gerbs' takeaway. Again, Gerbs is my call sign I had when I flew B-1s, but I'll give you my takeaway on all of this. You need to work on your certifications, Security Plus, Networks Plus, and then also the CISSP Associate. I think it's very important that you get those certifications done. If you can get the Certified Ethical Hacker, I think that helps put a different perspective on how you look at things. So those are some key certifications that if you can get those, I would highly recommend it. Also, if you are in the United States, you can join the military, or even in your country, they may have the cyber forces that are within your military. If you can join their military, I would recommend that. One, it's patriotism towards your country, but 2, they teach you also the skills you will never ever get anywhere else. It's very hard to get those skills. And then basically 3 is join various local security organizations to help you with introductions to people, with getting some technical knowledge around these different aspects that are going on. So those are great ways to get started. And then if you go to college, a local university in your area, that could also help you with, depending upon what kind of security program they have in place. But again, it's not just the technical pieces that you have to focus on, it's the soft skills as well. So those are very important, that you get the right books, you study the right techniques, and you get the soft skills you need to be successful in security. All right, so let's move on next to our CISSP training. So, an overview. The security is considered basically at all stages of system development. So when you're looking at engineering processes and you're trying to design a secure environment, you need to have security considered at all stages of the system development. And I say this because I do this on a personal basis daily in my job. I am always dealing with security in the various stages, from the beginning of the application's creation all the way to the completion. And it could be the application built itself specifically for a specific process, or it could be a already pre-built application that a vendor is providing it for you. And one of the questions that I ask these vendors that bring us products is, your security people, are they understanding the secure development life cycle, and as our secure software development life cycle, which is typically called SSDLC. Sometimes you'll see it acronym as just SDLC for software development life cycle, and security is considered one aspect underneath that. But it should be considered basically in all areas of system development. And the following that I'll throw out there are really some key items that you need to be aware of as you're dealing with secure design. Now, you have objects and subjects. An object is a resource used by a subject. So, as an example, an object would be a computer system. That would be an object. Subject would be basically the process requesting access. Could be, we call them an RPA, a robot process algorithm, or it could possibly be an individual. It could be a service account. It could be anything that is reaching in and using that object or that computer system, that wireless router, that whatever that might be. Okay, so those are objects and subjects. Now, the other key point around this is that, as we all know, security is based around trust, and there has to be trust set up between the objects and the subjects. And so, as a user, let's say a service account is a user, and then you in this scenario, an R&D computer system is the object. Well, these two must have a trust between the two, the service account and the R&D computer system. Well, this could be manipulated by attackers in the fact that attackers would come out and they would go after that R&D computer, hoping to get access to it. And an example of this would be, this occurred a while back where the Iranians had centrifuges that were hacked using, I think, Stuxnet. And so those accounts that activated and worked on those centrifuges, they were user access. Whether it was a service account or individual users' credentials were compromised, those are user accounts. So that R&D computer system would be hacked by these attackers. So these trusts, though, are in place. Now, if the trust didn't exist, well, then the attackers wouldn't get anything. So that's why it's important that a trust is set up between these objects and the subjects. Some other key terms is closed and open systems. You hear terms about this, but a closed system is designed to work in a very narrow range. So we would have, typically in the military, we'd have a closed environment network, and what you would do is that it would not be connected to anything else. You couldn't do anything other than what's inside that system. So if that system's able to hook to the F-22 fighter, then what would happen is that system would be connected to it, but it would not be connected to any internet, any other network shares, nothing. It would be a closed system. And it's really defined by the manufacturer. So many of the defense contractors will develop closed systems so that they don't get hacked. The problem with this, just to keep in mind, is that they take a lot more overhead to ensure that they are protected. These closed systems, the manufacturers put things in place, but they don't always put the level of security in there as well. And it's like, again, they can be a little bit more, they can be significantly more secure. However, it's just, you need to plan for this. You need to make sure that you have people that can manage these systems. Now, open systems, these are agreed upon on an industry standard. So if there's an industry standard set up around these particular environments, these are open systems, and they're much easier to integrate with other systems as well. There's more options into the network. They're less secure, and this would be a current computer system that you would run into would fall into these open systems. And typical networking and typical computer systems are open systems. Now, there's closed and open source code. Now, closed source code is proprietary code that is set up specifically for your environment. You may have a lab. I usually keep kind of going to go back to the lab environment where you built up just a basic application that may be working and I've seen this in like Visual Basic 6, right? So it's really old, but that application works specifically for whatever you want it to do. That would be proprietary code. These can be designed for both open and closed systems, but what ends up happening is they're not always updated because they rely on the manufacturer for those. If they're a homegrown system, like I just mentioned with the VB6, you do run into risks where they will get exploited by people. And so these people will exploit them, and they're never really updated because one person just made this out of convenience, made this application, and it works, and it provides what they want. But it's never updated, and so therefore over time creates a vulnerability. There's good companies around this space would be Microsoft, Boeing, I mean, you name it. There's software development people everywhere. Here in Wichita, Kansas, we got Flint Hills Group, which is another company that does software development for all kinds of contractors, you name it. They're all over the place. You also need to have techniques to maintain your confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, if you're studying for your CISSP, CIA is extremely important, and there's various techniques by software developers to do this. And basically, any of the following that we're going to talk about here can be used outside of software development as well, but software development is the primary place where this kind of begins. Now, confinement is a restricted user. You process access and actions to a program. So what happens is you restrict the user or the process to a specific program or a specific action within a program. Now, it does allow the process to read, write for specific locations. And that would be just you're confining the capability of what it can and cannot do. Now, the sandbox also provides some level of confinement. You want that applications to run in the sandbox, and this is where you place these restrictions on where they can operate. And they must meet or operate areas with a higher sense of security. Now, what it comes right down to is this, is like an example I could have for you is only a specified systems can operate against a specified database. You've got it very narrowed on what they can and cannot do. They also have any systems outside the scope will not be allowed. So those are kind of the examples that are in place. I use this all the time, especially when dealing with higher proprietary systems. You want to make sure that only these ones can talk to certain other ones. That didn't really make sense. All these ones. That's starting to sound like my daughter. No, all the systems that can talk, only a certain subset. So only A can talk to B. It can't talk to C, but it can only talk to B. Those are kind of important areas to put in place. Now, as we get into bounds are defined process is a given specific authority to operate. Now, there can be many or there can be few. I recommend less is more. Don't do a lot. Keep it little. Okay? That doesn't make keep it little. That's really strange. My English language skills are not so good today. What it comes into is you got your user, you got your kernel, you got administrator. They need to define these processes for a specific capability. So if you need this the kernel process to run a certain way, then you define that. If you have your administrator to run a certain way, you define that. And these bounds will keep them from doing this, from doing more than they should. You also have to put these bounds in place for operating systems, memory, and hardware. Do you want the kernel to be running in a certain format? Do you want it to have full capability within the entire system up and down the stack? Or do you want the user to have that capability? Those are key things you need to put in place to restrict that kind of use. As an example, you'd have a malware utilizes errors when in setting bounds and basically deals with the kernel and manipulates the kernel. You see this routinely in the security space because what's happening is the user accounts are getting locked down pretty well. So now what are they doing? They're going after the system or the user or the kernel accounts to try to manipulate the overall system themselves. Now, process isolation. Ensure that it only affects specific memory locations. These, you need to make sure you isolate the processes so that only areas within memory are affected. It's really a part of a stable system. And what will happen with hackers if they're trying to do a denial of service attack, they will go and mess with these processes. And if they can cause them to be unstable, well, then it causes the system to not work. And realistically, you don't have to nuke the system to make it not functional. You just have to create stability in it, and that will do a huge factor in as well. As an example, you could have cut, paste, copy. You would allow those to transition between the two. You can have macros to run outside defined parameters. All of those pieces can be available. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. As you're dealing with controls, there's also, you need to put in place different controls to limit the access to authorized objects. These rules are in place to limit your access. For example, file access. You may have a lot of people have read only, but you may only want a few that can modify. So again, those are the type of controls you would put in place to restrict access to an environment. There's mandatory and discretionary access controls, called MAC and DAC. And these are designed to limit access to objects by subjects. So the objects are limited, and so there are only certain subjects can talk to these objects, which we started at the beginning of this section on the podcast around. And those what these MACs and DACs are for. A MAC is a subject cannot define the object that can be accessed by the user. So basically it's saying is that the subject can't define what it's going to go after. You have to define that for them. So that's a MAC, mandatory access controls. And so those are already set for that user. DAC is flexibility with access objects can be accessed by the user. So the user has the capability to move things around to decide what he or she wants to have access to. So again, mandatory, it's defined. Discretionary, it's more loosey-goosey. It's more available for you to be able to do what you need to do. And so an identity of a user may be granted greater access. That would be an example of a DAC. And that in that space would be, it depends on the situation. You may want the user to be able to do that. So those are kind of different access controls, MAC and DAC. And you'll see these kind of, all these questions or all these terms in various formats within the CISSP exam. All right, so let's move on to the CISSP exam questions. And we've got 3 questions for you today. And we're going to go through and find out which ones do you think fit the mold. All right, so this comes from TechTarget. TechTarget had some different options out there, and I like what TechTarget brings from some different CISSP exam questions. They pull some of these specifically from ISC Squared. So the first one, what are the various SDLC development models covered in the CISSP exam? Now, I didn't talk about these today, but they are covered in the exam, and if you are dealing with development, you will have to deal with these in some form, shape, or another. So the first one is waterfall. Second, or I should say, waterfall, V-shaped, iterative, agile, spiral, and big bang. Now, these are the different methodologies on how you do development work. So if you've dealt with development, these are all relatively, you know these. But if you have never dealt with development, which when I first took my CISSP, I'd never dealt with that at all. It was very interesting. And now I deal with development a lot. So I have a development team that works specifically for me. So those are key pieces, right? So waterfall, V-shaped, iterative, agile, spiral, and big bang. Waterfall, that was A. B, waterfall, X-shaped, so V-shaped, X-shaped, repetitive, agile, spiral, and big bang. C, waterfall, Y-shaped, repetitive, agile, spiral, and big bang. Or D, none of the above. Okay, so the big difference on all that, again, if you're taking the CISSP exam, pick out the ones that kind of stand out. And which ones if you don't know, then guess. So in this case here, it is A, waterfall, it's waterfall, V-shaped, iterative, agile, spiral, and big bang. All right, so that is the first question. Second question, attempt to take advantage how a system handles multiple requests. So if there's an attempt to take advantage of how a system handles multiple requests, what kind of attack is this? So you have aggregation is A, B is a state attack, C is a state machine model, D is a method authentication code. Mac. I can't even say it. That's really sad. So aggregation, state attacks, state machine model, and message authentication code. Okay, so if you're taking the CISSP, look for some things that may be similar. So in the case of state attacks and state machine models, do you know the difference between the two? If you don't know, well, those two seem to stand out as that they're trying to say the same question twice. Maybe it's one of those. And it is. It's state attacks. All right, so this involves removal of characteristics from an identity in order to easily represent an essential properties. All right, so this comes down to is A, algorithm, B, abstraction, C, diffusion, D, substitution. So it involves the removal of characteristics from an entity in order to easily represent its essential properties. All right, so it's taking characteristics away to basically represent what does it look like. So it's algorithm, abstraction, diffusion, substitution. And it is abstraction. So you're removing the characteristics from an entity to try to pull pieces out. You're abstracting pieces out to understand the essential properties of that. Okay, so that's abstraction. The core of an OS and one of its main functions is to provide access to system resources, which includes the system's hardware and processes. So the core of an OS and one of its main functions is to provide access to system resources, which includes the system's hardware and processes. A, system kernel. B, state attack. C, abstraction. D, firmware. Okay, so if you listen to the past couple of questions, two of those don't make any sense, right? Abstraction and state attacks, that doesn't make any sense. So you could narrow it down to two. System kernel is the answer, A. Thanks so much for joining me today on my podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave a review on iTunes, as I would greatly appreciate your feedback. Also, don't forget the 60% off my membership at CISSP will be ending on the 19th of March. So sign up today for this once-in-a-lifetime sales event. Thanks again for listening. See ya.
Hey, thanks again for listening today. It's been my pleasure to prep you for the CISSP exam. Are you interested, though, in some free CISSP exam questions? Head on over to freecissprequestions.com and sign up to join my email list, and you'll receive access for 60 free CISSP questions each and every month for the next 6 months. That's a total of 360 questions just for signing up with CISSP Cyber Training. You'll also gain access to other free CISSP resources, so just head on over to freecissprequestions.com and sign up, or head on over to CISSPcybertraining.com and sign up today. Have a wonderful day, and we will catch you on the flip side. See ya.